He was 10 years old and he had stopped growing. While the other boys in Rosario shot up around him, Lionel Messi stayed small. So small that opposing coaches would demand to see his birth certificate before matches, convinced there was no way a child that tiny could be the age listed on the form. So small that a doctor sat his parents down and told them the truth. Their son had a growth hormone deficiency. Without treatment, he would grow to a maximum height of around 4 feet 7 inches. With treatment, injections every single night, needles into his own legs, $1,000 a month his family could not afford, he might have a chance. Not at football, at a normal life. That is where the story of the greatest footballer who ever lived actually begins. Because being a prodigy is not a gift you receive. It is a debt you spend your whole life paying. And Messi paid all of it, right up until the very end. To understand what that price really was, you have to go back to that small apartment in Rosario, Argentina. Messi was born there on the 24th of June 1987, the third son of Jorge, a steelworker, and Celia, a part-time cleaner. This was not a wealthy family. This was a working family in a working city, and football was simply the air that everyone breathed. Leo, as everyone called him, was different from the start. His grandmother, Celia, saw it first. When he was 5, the coach at the local club Grandoli took one look at this tiny boy and said, "No, too small. Come back when you have grown." His grandmother walked straight up to that coach and refused to leave until he put Leo on the pitch. She was the one who took him to every training session. She was the one at every game. And when Messi scores today, when he points to the sky, that is who he is pointing at. She died when he was 10. The same year the diagnosis came, the same year the ground started to shift beneath his feet. Because here is the cruelty of it. At the exact moment the world discovered that this boy was something close to a miracle, his own body was trying to stop him. He was scoring goals at a rate that did not make sense. By the time he was a teenager, he had put away close to 500 goals in youth football. Newell's Old Boys, the club he loved, the club whose shirt he still wears in his heart, had a machine on their hands, and they could not afford to keep him healthy. The treatment cost around $900 to $1,000 every month. Newell's helped for a while, then decided a boy that young was too big a gamble to invest in long-term. River Plate, one of the biggest clubs in the country, looked at the talent, looked at the medical bill, and walked away. Think about that. Two of the most storied clubs in Argentina had the future of football sitting in front of them, and they let him go because of a monthly invoice. So the family did the only thing left to do. They crossed an ocean. Messi's father had heard that Barcelona might be interested. In September of the year 2000, Jorge took his 13-year-old son to Spain for a trial. Everything was riding on it. Not just a football career, the treatment, the money, the whole future of a small, quiet boy who barely spoke. The trial lasted about 2 minutes before the man in charge, Barcelona's technical director Carles Rexach, understood exactly what he was looking at. Messi scored 5 goals that day. Rexach was so convinced, so terrified that a rival might snatch this boy away, that he needed to close the deal immediately. There was no contract to hand. There was no official paper anywhere in the restaurant where they sat. So Rexach grabbed a paper napkin, and on that napkin he wrote a promise. Barcelona would sign Lionel Messi. Barcelona would pay for his treatment. That napkin, that single square of restaurant paper, would sell at auction decades later for nearly $1 million. Because it was not really a contract. It was the moment the sport changed forever. But the price was already being charged. To take that deal, 13-year-old Messi moved to Barcelona and his parents went back to Argentina. He was left largely alone in a foreign country. He could not speak Catalan. He barely said a single word in the dressing room, so quiet that some of his teammates genuinely believed he was mute. He cried himself to sleep for months. The most gifted young footballer his coaches had ever seen was sitting silent in the corner of the room, a homesick boy injecting himself in the legs every night, paying in loneliness for a talent he never asked to be born with. That is the pattern you have to hold on to for the rest of this story. Every gift comes with a bill. And the bigger the gift, the bigger the bill. The talent, of course, could not be contained. Messi grew, thanks to the treatment, to around 5'7". He rose through Barcelona's academy and then into the first team, and what happened next belongs to the history books in a way almost nothing else in the sport does. He made defenders look like they had never played football before. He glided past them as if they were standing in wet cement. Over the years came the trophies that stopped feeling real. 10 La Liga titles, 4 Champions League crowns, 8 Ballon d'Or awards, more than any human being who has ever lived. He became the greatest goal scorer in the history of his club, in the history of the league, arguably in the history of the game itself. And yet, for all of it, there was a hole in the middle of the story. The one thing every Argentine footballer is measured against. The one thing that turned Diego Maradona from a great player into a god. The World Cup. For most of his career, that trophy was the great wound in the Messi legend. He first pulled on the senior Argentina shirt as a teenager, hailed almost immediately as the probable successor to Maradona, and from that moment the weight was crushing. He carried Argentina to the final in 2014 and they lost to Germany. A single goal in extra time, the closest thing to the summit before falling all the way back down. He was given the Golden Ball as the best player of that entire tournament, and he could barely bring himself to look at it, because the only prize that mattered was sitting in German hands, and it was not his. There were painful exits in 2006, in 2010, in 2018. There were losses in Copa America finals that cut just as deep. There were retirements from the national team announced in tears and then quietly taken back because he could not stay away and he could not walk toward the ending he wanted either. And there was a whole country that adored him and at the same time could not quite forgive him for not being Maradona. That is a strange kind of prison to live in. To be loved and doubted by the same millions of people at the same time for years on end. The Prodigy had given them everything the club game could offer, and the one thing they demanded from him in the blue and white kept slipping away. And they let him know it, in the whistles, in the columns, in the endless comparisons to a man who had been dead for years and still cast a longer shadow. The gift had made him a legend everywhere on earth except, it sometimes seemed, in his own home. Then came 2022. Qatar. And after a lifetime of paying, Messi finally collected. He dragged Argentina through that tournament by sheer will, scoring, creating, refusing to let his last real chance slip away. The final against France is remembered as maybe the greatest World Cup final ever played. A 3-3 war settled on penalties, Messi lifting the trophy at last. It was supposed to be the ending, the perfect ending. The debt paid in full, the story closed, the Prodigy finally at peace. But prodigies do not get clean endings. And this is where the story turns dark. Because Messi came back. He came back for one more. He came back for 2026. He should have been 39 years old and watching from a beach. Instead, the lure was too strong, and Argentina were the defending champions, and the tournament was being held across the United States, Canada, and Mexico. Messi told the world he was taking it match by match, that there were no guarantees that his body might not allow it. But everyone knew. He was going. One last dance. And nobody, not even Messi, could have predicted the storm it would become. Because the 2026 World Cup did not just become the story of a legend's final ride. It became one of the most controversial tournaments in the history of the sport. And Lionel Messi, the quiet boy from Rosario, ended up right in the eye of it. The trouble started early, and it followed Argentina like a shadow. In their very first match against Algeria, Messi escaped any punishment for a heavy challenge, and the whispers began. Then came the round of 16 against Egypt, and the whispers turned into a roar. An Egyptian goal was ruled out for a foul that had happened 20 seconds earlier, all the way on the other side of the pitch. Moments later, a similar challenge inside Argentina's own penalty area went unreviewed, right before Argentina scored the goal that put them through. Egypt's players and their head coach walked off that field furious. Egypt would later file a formal complaint demanding an investigation into the officiating. It kept happening. In the quarter-final against Switzerland, a yellow card for an Argentine midfielder was somehow set aside while a Swiss forward was sent off. And this was against the backdrop of a tournament that had already become synonymous with officiating chaos for everyone, not just Argentina. Iran had a late winner disallowed for a marginal offside. Croatia were knocked out after a late equalizer was chalked off by video review. Team after team walked away feeling robbed by extended reviews and inches-wide offside calls and handballs that were fouls one week and nothing the next. The whole competition felt like it was being decided in a video booth rather than on the grass. But Argentina were the team the anger kept circling back to because Argentina kept winning, and the pattern felt the same to neutral eyes every single time. The numbers only made it louder. By the time the final arrived, Argentina were being carded, on average, only once every 19 or so fouls they committed, a rate that on paper made them look like the cleanest, most disciplined side in the entire field of 48, which to any honest observer, they plainly were not. They went through the entire tournament without a single decision being overturned against them by video review. To the people who supported them, this was just a great team pushing the limits like every great team does, and the referees were beyond anyone's control. To everyone else, it looked like the biggest tournament on earth was quietly bending in one direction and toward one man. And the direction, fair or not, had a name on it: Messi. Even the greatest players in history were dragged into it. At one point, footage circulated appearing to show Cristiano Ronaldo's own account interacting online with a post that accused FIFA of trying to hand the World Cup to Messi. Whether that was real, whether it meant anything at all, it did not matter. The idea was already out there, spreading across the internet like fire. That the whole thing was being arranged for the fairy tale. That Messi was not winning, that he was being given. Then came the semi-final. And if you wanted a tournament that had lost the run of itself, this was the match that proved it. Argentina against England. A fixture that has never ever just been about football. You have to understand the weight behind that game. In 1982, Argentina and Britain fought a brief and bloody war over a group of islands in the South Atlantic. The British call them the Falklands. Argentines call them Las Malvinas, and they still claim them to this day. 4 years after that war, at the 1986 World Cup, Diego Maradona knocked England out with the infamous Hand of God goal. A goal he punched into the net with his fist, and he later admitted that the bitterness over the war and the boys who had died, shot down like little birds, was in his mind when he did it. Then came 1998, another epic knockout tie. A young David Beckham sent off, England eliminated on penalties once again. This is not a rivalry. This is a scar that reopens every time these two nations are drawn against each other. And in 2026, some of the old wounds were still speaking out loud. Gary Lineker, who had scored England's consolation goal in that infamous 1986 defeat and had become one of the most recognizable voices in British football, openly said he wanted revenge this time around. On the Argentine side, players promised to leave their lives on the field, while their coach tried, with limited success, to play down the enormous historical significance of it all. And in 2026, that scar was ripped wide open. In the build-up, Argentine fans gathered waving flags bearing the islands. Murals appeared in Buenos Aires, linking their footballers to the soldiers of that war. It was the first time in his entire long career that Messi had ever played a competitive match against England, and the moment carried the freight of decades. Argentina came from behind to win it 2-1, a thunderous long-range strike sealing the comeback, and as they celebrated, one of their players unfurled a banner on the pitch. Las Malvinas son Argentinas. The Malvinas are Argentine, a political statement on the biggest stage in sport, in the middle of one of the most sensitive disputes between two nations. To Argentine fans, it was the real victory of the whole tournament. To much of the watching world, it was another sign that this Argentina, this campaign, had turned into something uglier than a football team chasing a trophy. Which brings us to the final. Argentina against Spain at MetLife Stadium in New Jersey. The night the fairy tale was supposed to be written. And instead, it collapsed into chaos. Let us start with what Messi actually did, because it matters. He played all of it. More than 120 minutes, extra time and all, about a month after turning 39 years old. He gave his body one final time to the cause, but the magic would not come. Spain controlled the ball, created the better chances, and pushed Argentina deeper and deeper into their own half. For long stretches, Argentina could barely get near the Spanish goal, and it was their goalkeeper, Emiliano Martinez, and his string of extraordinary saves that kept them breathing at all. In fact, through the entire 90 minutes of normal time, Argentina failed to register a single shot on target in a World Cup final. That had never happened before in the modern history of the tournament. Messi himself, across all those minutes, managed just one real attempt. The Prodigy was there, on the pitch, chasing the fairy tale with everything left in a 39-year-old body. But the miracle simply was not coming. And to add one more small twist of the knife, the Golden Boot, as the tournament's top scorer, and the all-time World Cup goal-scoring record along with it, went not to Messi but to France's Kylian Mbappé. Even the individual consolations were slipping through his fingers. And then it got worse. Late in the match, Argentina's Enzo Fernandez was sent off for a second bookable offense, a bad challenge, leaving Argentina down to 10 men and clinging on. Spain pressed, and in the middle of that pressure came the moment that turned a huge portion of the football world against Messi in a way it never had before. With tempers boiling, Messi was seen appealing to the referee, pointing, insisting that a Spanish player, Marc Cucurella, be sent off. The supposed offense was that Cucurella had covered his mouth while speaking, which under a new rule introduced at that tournament had actually led to red cards. The referee ignored the appeal, but the cameras did not, and the reaction was instant and brutal. This was Lionel Messi, 8 Ballon d'Ors, the greatest of all time, and people watched him try to get an opponent thrown out of a World Cup final for covering his mouth. Fans who had worshipped him for 20 years turned on him in a single afternoon. They called it cringeworthy. They called it shameless. One fan wrote that it was the most unsportsmanlike thing they had ever seen on a football pitch. Another wrote that Messi might be the best ever, but he was now also the man who asked for a player to be sent off for covering his mouth in a final. The word that spread fastest, that stuck to him hardest, was a small and cruel one. Rat. That was who he had become for that moment to a chunk of the internet. Not a genius. A rat. And the ugliness did not stop when the final whistle blew. Spain had won, 1-0. A goal in extra time from Ferran Torres, latching onto a pass from Nico Williams. Spain were world champions for the second time, and as they climbed the podium to collect their medals and lift the trophy, the images that went around the world were not of grace. They were of Argentine players turning their backs on the ceremony, of a brawl that had broken out on the field. Footage appeared to show Argentine players striking Spanish players. An Argentine assistant coach appeared to strike a Spain player. Argentina's own coach, Lionel Scaloni, had to rush onto the pitch to physically pull his own people away and calm the whole thing down. FIFA opened a formal disciplinary investigation into the scenes. Through all of it, there was one figure who did not fight, did not lash out, did not turn his back. Messi. In the middle of the mess that surrounded his final act, he simply walked away. Quiet. Just as he had been at 13 in that Barcelona dressing room. Many fans, even ones who were furious with the team, noticed that. They noticed that while everyone else was swinging, Messi went silently into what may be the last World Cup night of his life, having given everything and won nothing. But the backlash had gone global, and it had gone far beyond one man. Some fans launched petitions with names like Argentina Out, and the numbers on them ran into the millions across scores of countries, calling for Argentina to be stripped or replaced. Other petitions demanded the final itself be replayed. The Grandmaster of Anger online, the collective fury of neutral supporters, framed the whole Argentine campaign as a vulgar display of fouls and gamesmanship, and referees looking the other way. It got so heated that the president of Argentina himself stepped in to publicly condemn the critics and defend the team and its captain. And here's the thing you cannot escape when you look at it honestly. This was not new. This was the oldest part of the Messi story wearing a 2026 costume. Go back to Qatar in 2022, the tournament everyone now remembers as perfect, and the accusations were exactly the same. Fans screamed that it was rigged for him, them, and two. They mockingly called him Pessi. They pointed at penalties and refereeing decisions and cried that FIFA wanted the fairy tale so badly it was tilting the pitch. Even in his moment of ultimate triumph, there were people insisting he had not really earned it. The Prodigy has never once been allowed to simply be great. Every gift he has ever given has come attached to a bill of suspicion. That is the price. That has always been the price. So where does that leave him now in the summer of 2026 as the dust settles? It leaves him back home in Rosario, the same city where a small boy once stopped growing. His private jet landed near his hometown in the early hours of the morning after the final. Fans were waiting with flags and signs bearing his face, but he did not appear in public. He posted a short message instead. The pain, he said, was immense, and the wound would take time to heal. His international future now hangs completely in the balance. Reports out of Argentina suggest he is not expected to announce a retirement from the national team just yet, that the federation is planning a proper farewell match on home soil, a hero's send-off in front of his own people before any final decision is made. He did not go home empty-handed in every sense. He finished the tournament with 8 goals, and he earned a place on the shortlist for the goal of the tournament for a long-range strike against Algeria. He became one of only a tiny handful of players in history to reach a 3rd World Cup final, and he led his country in all of them. Even in defeat, even in the middle of all that noise, the numbers still whispered what everyone has always known, that there has never been anyone quite like him. But the ending he actually got is the point of this whole story. Because we like to imagine that prodigies live in a different world from the rest of us, that the gift protects them, that being the best means being loved, cleanly and completely, forever. Messi's life is the argument against that comforting idea. The gift did not protect him. It exposed him. It put a target on a 10-year-old who could not afford his own medicine. It put a homesick child alone in a foreign city. It put a lifetime of expectation on shoulders that were, for years, too small to grow. And at the very end, in what should have been his golden farewell, it put him at the center of a firestorm, adored and despised in the same breath, called the greatest of all time and a rat in the same afternoon. That is what it costs, to be that good, that early, for that long. You do not just carry your own dreams. You carry a nation's grief and a nation's hope. You carry every fan who needs you to be a saint, and every rival who needs you to be a fraud. You become less a person and more a mirror that the whole world stares into and argues about. Diego Maradona knew it, and Lionel Messi, the quiet boy from Rosario who was told at 10 that he might never grow, learned it too. 1 injection, 1 goal, 1 broken heart at a time. He almost never made it out of that apartment in Rosario. A monthly invoice nearly ended the greatest career in the history of the sport before it began. And in the end, after 2 decades of paying and paying and paying, he walked off a field in New Jersey having given the game absolutely everything he had. And the game handed him back both a standing ovation and a knife. Maybe that is the truest thing about him. Not the trophies, not the records, not the 8 golden balls, but the fact that he kept coming back to pay a debt he never owed in the first place. He was born with a gift so enormous it nearly broke him as a child and followed him, controversy after controversy, all the way to the age of 39. They will argue about that final forever, about the referees, the red card, the covered mouth, the brawl, the petitions. But when the noise finally fades, one thing will remain. A small boy who could not stop growing scared, a grandmother who believed in him, a paper napkin, and a lifetime spent proving that the price of being a prodigy is that the world never, ever lets you rest. Let me know in the comments. Did the world treat Lionel Messi fairly at the end? Or did the price of being a prodigy finally come due? Like and subscribe for more football documentaries. Until next time.